Joining us now, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Madam Vice President, good morning. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you, Savannah. Thank you.
Well, let's just start right there with Ukraine. The president was pretty clear. Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion, and then we end up having to fight about what to do and what not to do. Did the president essentially give the green light to Vladimir Putin to take a piece of Ukraine, to take a bite out of Ukraine?
So, Savannah, first of all, I will tell you that I, every morning, start my morning and my day reading the Presidential Daily Brief, the PDB, which contains classified information about threats to our national security and hotspots around the world. I am often in the Situation Room with the leaders of our military and our intelligence community, and of course the President of the United States. And on the subject of Ukraine, I will tell you that the president has been very clear, and we as the United States are very clear. If Putin takes aggressive action, we are prepared to levy serious and severe costs, period. And I will tell you that part of the posture that we have taken is grounded in the respect and the value we place in sovereignty and territorial integrity,
Madam
and in
Vice
particular
President,
in this case,
I'm sorry
the
to interrupt.
sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Of course, and
so
I'm
we
so
are
sorry
very
to interrupt,
clear,
but
and
it is less than clear, because 30 minutes after the news conference, the White House press secretary had to actually clarify the president's remarks.
Savannah, I'm being clear with you right now.
Yes, okay.
And so if you're interested, I'll continue to be clear, which is that we have had direct conversations through various levels of diplomacy with Putin, with Russia, and most importantly, with our allies and partners, including our NATO allies and partners. We are clear and have been clear for quite some time that our first approach and priority and preference is that these issues could be resolved diplomatically. We have also been clear and continue to be clear that if Russia takes aggressive action, it will be met with severe costs.
Is aggressive action, just to be, let's be clear, because there are 100,000 Russian troops amassed at the border with Ukraine, and people there are hanging on the president's every word. Is there any amount of land that Russia could take that the president would turn a blind eye to, not issue those, quote, severe sanctions he's been threatening for that massive full-scale invasion?
Our interpretation of any country, in this case Russia and Vladimir Putin, denying or violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine will be interpreted as aggressive action, and it will be met with a cost, a severe cost, period.
The president said yesterday, among other things, that he thinks that Putin probably will invade Ukraine. Later he said he wasn't sure, but he said he probably will go in. Is that, for all intents and purposes, acknowledging that this threat of severe sanctions that the administration has made is having no effect on Putin, that he's actually not deterred by it?
Well, I'm not going to psychoanalyze President Putin of Russia, but I will tell you this. It is clear to us that the decision is probably in his hands, and we are prepared to take appropriate action based on whatever he decides to do.
The president also openly talked about division within NATO countries and NATO allies about what to do in the event of a Russian incursion. How damaging is that when the message that's being preached overseas at this moment by our Secretary of State and others is that NATO stands united?
I will tell you, and I think your audience knows, Joe Biden has been working as the former head of foreign relations and as the former vice president and a senator in a role of leadership on foreign policy for years. One of the things he values most is direct and consistent communication with our allies and partners around the world. And in the year that I have been here as vice president, I have witnessed him continuously engaged in direct and honest conversations with our partners and allies, and this is no exception.
Before I leave this, I mean, Ukrainian officials reportedly heard these words from President Biden with alarm. I know the White House tried to clarify it and clean it up afterwards, but was the damage done? You can't unring the bell. Is Vladimir Putin likely to listen to a later statement from the White House press secretary or the words of President Biden?
Myself. I will repeat. And I'm Vice President of the United States. And I'm Vice President of the United States. And the President and I work closely together, and I know his position because he has been consistent in that regard. If Vladimir Putin and Russia takes aggressive action, it will be met with a cost that will be severe.
Let's talk about another comment the president made. He openly cast doubt on whether the 2022 midterm elections would be legitimate. He said it all depends, which is astonishing to hear a president question whether our elections will be legitimate. We've heard it before, but not from this president. Is he really concerned that we may not have fair and free elections?
The president has been consistent on this issue. And the issue at hand, I was there last night in the chamber of the Senate, and the issue is that there are two bills, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act, that have been the solution that has been offered to address the fact that around our country, states have put in place laws that are purposely making it more difficult for the American people to vote. Laws which will be felt by at least 55 million Americans, regardless of their party affiliation, their race, their gender, or their geographic location.
Well, to the point, though, because those bills were debated. The bills were debated and they didn't pass.
If I may finish, if I may finish.
But the specific question, if you don't mind, does he think, now that these bills haven't been passed, that the 22 midterms won't be legitimate or fair or free?
Let's not conflate issues. So what we are looking at, and the topic of so much debate last night, was that we as America cannot afford to allow this blatant erosion of our democracy, and in particular, the right of all Americans who are eligible to vote to have access to the ballot unfettered. That is the topic of the conversation, and let's not be distracted by the political gamesmanship when what is truly at stake are issues like whether Americans with disability have the opportunity to vote by mail, whether a single parent has the opportunity with 3 kids in the back seat to vote by dropping off their ballot in a drop box instead of in line with those 3 kids for hours. These are the issues that are at stake.
And the president laid a lot of
and pivotal issues in terms of our democracy. We had an extensive conversation about foreign policy, Savannah. Well, I've met with prime ministers and presidents from around the globe, both partners and allies of ours. They are asking, what is going on with voting rights in America? Because they look to us as a role model of what it means to be a democracy, and they are monitoring to wonder and question whether there is an erosion of our democracy and therefore an erosion of one of the best role models of what a democracy does and can do.
Speaking of democracy and politics, the president put a lot of blame yesterday on Republicans for failure to get some of these key initiatives passed. But, you know, you have a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate, as you are well aware. Did the administration fail to temper its initiatives to meet political reality? In other words, should you have been more willing to compromise to try to get all Democrats on board? These initiatives failed because Democrats weren't united, let alone Republicans. Was that an error as you look back on this year?
Well, when I look back on this year, I think about things like the bipartisan infrastructure law. Administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have tried for years.
Well, doesn't that show Republicans were willing to help if the initiatives were good?
But they tried for years to do what the American people want, and what the American people know is not an issue that should be thought of through a political lens. Things like upgrading our roads and bridges, things like cleaning out the lead pipes of America, because over 50% of children under the age of 6 are exposed to lead. These are the things that are part of the accomplishments that occur through a process of compromise, yes. But what ends up happening is that the American people benefit. Broadband in that law is going to be now more accessible and affordable to Americans around the country from rural areas to urban areas.
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris, I am way out of time. Next time they got to give us an hour so I don't have to interrupt and you can go as long as you want, but we are out of time.